you have a contract that is obviously in writing and signed by the contractor. So it does not matter that you paid them for it. It does not matter that you told them what you wanted it to say. Basically, you gave them an outline. If you don't have something in signed by the contractor, they own it, and so email doesn't work either. So if you want to own the copyright, you need to make sure it's in writing. Now, if you engage someone and they create material for you and it's not signed, they own it and you have a license to use it. You have a non-exclusive license to use it, so you're allowed to use it. You're not in breach of their copyright by using it, but you don't own the copyright. So depending on what they're creating for you, this may be important. If you have someone, perhaps they're doing something very simple for you that will have a limited use, like say they're formatting a blog post for you, or formatting or doing PowerPoint slides for you maybe. And so you're going to use them once, and then they'll go in a file folder, never to be seen again. If all you have is a license to use them, it's not the end of the world. But if you're engaging someone to uh, co-write a book with you, using your materials, you want to make sure that they've signed an agreement so that you own everything that they write. Um, uh, yeah, so make sure you have that in writing. It doesn't need to be terribly complicated. Now, I will say that, the more important the material is that they are preparing for you, the more complicated you may want the agreement to be. But at the end of the day, the language that assigns rights to you is fairly simple, can be fairly simple. And here's some sample language here. This language you'll also find in your vendor agreement, in your templates. Um, and also you would find it in your, like if you use Fiverr or Guru, one of those online systems, they have this language in there as well that protects you. So you just, the contractor, in this case, you're the client. In this example, contractor assigns to client for no additional consideration all of contractor's rights, including copyrights and all deliverables and other works prepared by contractor in performing the services. And so that assigns those copyrights to you. So when you are engaged by a client and you're creating material for them, things get a little more complicated. So here we need to understand the difference of three different ways that clients get rights in the materials that you create. So one is the work for hire, the other is by assignment, and the third is by license. So remember the employee example where when they're your W-2 employee, as soon as they create it, it's yours as if you made it yourself. That is what work for hire does, but on a contract basis. So when you have the magic words, and there are magic words required, the work for hire or work made for hire, in your agreement that says anything, the work product that's copyrightable is considered work made for hire, then your client is considered the author. You aren't considered the author, the client is. And so when the client is engaging you to create original materials that qualify for work made for hire, then they would expect this language, and it's reasonable for them to ask for this, for them to own it, as if they made it. And so this would apply only to original materials. So that work made for hire, that literally means work that's made in the course of being hired. And so it would never apply to pre-existing materials. It would only apply to the original work you're doing for the client. And so this is some typical language. This appears in the client agreements, in your template, in your templates, and it also appears in your vendor agreements, your subcontract agreements, because when you are the client, you also would expect to own, as a work made for hire, any eligible materials that your vendor is creating for you. So there's a separate assignment, and the reason there's always a separate assignment is because work made for hire applies to, there's a, in the copyright law, there's very specific categories of works that qualify as a work made for hire. Things like collaborations and movies and maps. It's a very interesting list. You might want to look at it sometime. But but in the event whatever you're creating doesn't fall into one of those categories of work made for hire, then you're going to have this assignment language. So anything that's not work made for hire, you're going to assign all those rights to the client. And again, if this is original work that you've been specifically engaged to create for the client, then they would expect to own all those rights, and you should expect to assign all of those rights to the client. And so here's some very typical language regarding assignment, and then your templates have this language as well, and you would expect to see that from any agreement that's presented to you by your client. So that's original work.